I have not one, not two, but 5 different jam dirt boxes on here to make some noise with. I'll give you a very quick introduction to each of them, and then we're gonna deep dive into a bunch of sounds. And the pedals that we've got on here are the Fuzz Phrase SIs, so a silicon fuzz face inspired circuit. We've got the Octaurus, which is an octave fuzz Rattler V2. This takes a classic op-amp distortion, adds a built-in boost. There is the Red Muck, a classic early 70s scooped fuzz, and the Boomster, which is a boost with a 3-way switch and a volume pedal edition. Start out with some single coils. I've got my 1977 Strat. It has a set of Sir ML pickups in it. We're gonna hit the fuzz phrase first because I wanna play around with the fuzz and guitar volume and tone interaction. From there, we're going into the Octaurus, the Red Muck, the Rattler, and then we've got the Boomster at the end of chain. Now, a really cool feature with the Boomster is you can connect an expression pedal to it and use it as a volume pedal. Now, since that's running into my old Marshall and the Saint Rock React IR, I can use a volume pedal essentially to bring the gain on the amp down, so I can start off with a slightly less distorted sound on here, and then I can bring some level back by engaging the Boomster. The Rattler we're gonna hear as a boost to start off with, so I'm gonna keep the gain quite low. The Red Muck, the Octaurus, and the Fuzz Phrase, I'm just gonna crank them up. Let's just go on a little exploration here and play around with the pedals, not only on their own, but in conjunction with one another. And you'll notice I'm playing a lot with the pickup selector and my volume and tone controls on here. There's so many cool ways you can play around with the gain staging and what each pedal sees in turn here. Let's do it. were some very fun combinations on there. I was surprised at how stacking 3 or more pedals actually sounded really cool on there. For example, running the guitar volume really low into the fuzz phrase to give you that classic sparkly clean sound, then smashing that into the Octaurus and the Red Muck. You've got filth on filth, you've got the octave effect from the Octaurus, you've got all that girth and doomy fuzz from the Red Muck. Having the Boomster at the end of the chain to hit the amp a little bit harder is a really cool option as well. You know, running fuzz and drive pedals into a clean amp is a very different thing to running them into a dirty amp, and having that Boomster at the end of the chain essentially is like having a 2-channel amp switch on there. That's the way I'm thinking of it anyway. And you could hear the Rattler on there. It's doing a very, very different thing. You know, op-amp-based distortion on there. It's very aggressive. It's a lot tighter. I wouldn't say more amp-like, it's just a different flavor on there. Whereas, you know, you turn the Red Muck on in particular and you go, yeah, that is a fuzz. It totally transforms the guitar sound into this absolute monolithic hulking beast. Whereas the fuzz phrase, you know, if you've only ever tried a fuzz face cranked up and not sort of got it, you really do have to play with your guitar volume and tone controls on there. And then the Octaurus, I love octave fuzz so much. I love how glitchy that gets when you roll down the volume and tone controls on there. I love that it's also just super fat and girthy, and that's a sort of pedal I would love having in my fractal rig. You know, place it right at the start of the chain before any of the digital effects in there. You get that interaction between the guitar volume and tone controls. You get all that analog funkiness, but it's still compact in a rig like that. All right, let's grab a Les Paul now and continue the adventure. This is a 1990 Les Paul Custom. I've got a Burstbucker 1 and 2 in this guitar. I've also swapped amps. I've got my Baritone Molecular fired up. Now, I've disabled the clipping diodes and the bright cap in this amp, and I'm using the low input. It's not too dissimilar to using the low input of a JCM 800 in this setup, because I really want to hear the Red Muck into that low input. I also want to hear the Rattler used as the main gain stage in here. And in this setup, I guess the Boomster at the end can act as a volume and level boost. The Rattler I'm going to use as an amp-like distortion stage. The Red Muck is going to give me all the filth of the fuzz, and then I can absolutely pummel it with either the fuzz phrase or with the Octaurus in the front. Let's just hear the starting point on the bridge pickup. I had to turn all of them on at the same time in the name of science, right? That is pretty akin to playing a guitar synth. There's almost none of the original touch sensitivity or dynamics left in there, but it is kind of awesome on there, especially some of those low notes. You just get this like flat line sort of sound out of it. I'll go over and try the same thing on the high input, so I'm using a lot more crunch from the amp. I'm going to use less of a boost, less gain from the Rattler. Kind of turn the gain down on most things except for the fuzz phrase, which I will continue to use as a little front of chain enhancer. So guitar volume on 10, fuzz phrase in, I'll back the guitar volume off, and then we'll add the pedals as we see them. course, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. We heard all of the pedals cranked at the same time on there. Didn't really sound like a guitar anymore, right? It sounded like a synthesizer from the bowels of hell, not really the sort of sound that you'd take to your Tuesday night blues jam. But it was pretty fun, I will admit. That is so crazy and chaotic. Couple of my favorite combos on there were definitely using the Rattler just as an extra gain stage on there with this amp and with the Les Paul. It was a lot more amp-like, it was juicy and tight, and stacking that with the Red Muck on there was pretty amazing if you wanted to get a filthy doom tone on there. If you went a bit lighter with the Red Muck, you get this really nice smooth sound on there. Having the secondary foot switch to have those boosts on there, I think, are fantastic additions to those pedals. And you know, if you were using this with a clean backline amp as your main gain stage, it means you don't have to cart another pedal around just to give yourself a little bit of a solo boost on there. Of course, using the fuzz phrase as a sweetening effect on there was super cool as well. The Octaurus, I just love octave fuzz, like I said earlier. That one is very, very cool. There's kind of not a bad sound in it, or I should say all the sounds are super bad, and that's what's glorious about it on there. I know octave fuzz is not going to be everyone's favorite effect, but it is the definition of a character tone to me. All right. We got to do this. This is my Warmouth baritone that I've put together. It's in drop A. It's got an EMG 81 in it. So active pickup with the fuzz phrase up front. It's not really going to do any of that magic that we heard with the Strat, but that's cool. I might just bypass that for now. I have swapped the order of the Rattler and the Red Muck on there because I want to boost the fuzz with the Rattler. I'm also going into the high input on this amp, and I have the error switch to the left. So there's going to give me clipping diodes in the circuit. It's a lot more modern and chunky sounding. I'm gonna leave the Boomster out of it for now as well. We will just chunk away with the EMG, and I want to hear the Red Muck boosting a dirty amp. I think that's a really cool sound, and I want to hear the Rattler boosting the dirty amp, and I want to hear the Rattler boosting the Red Muck. Well, the Octaurus was a nice surprise on there. That is one of the filthiest sounds I think I've ever played in my life. That's just gonna make a lot of people upset in the comments. Hopefully there's a bunch of sickos in there as well who really enjoyed that as well. There's one last thing I want to do with this. I'm going to go back to the low input on here, and I want to use the Fuzz Face and the Red Muck with the Fender Meteora, because that has a bass cut control on it. So we're going to use that rather than to clean up the entire signal. We're just going to cut low end from the front of it. I want to really try and get this kind of unique chirpy fuzz sound out of it. Very interesting, right? And quite a nice little discovery. I'm sure we're all used to using the volume and the tone controls to clean up a fuzz, but this is one thing that I love about this guitar, having the bass cut control in there. You get that cleanup and that sparkle, but you still maintain that grit and that edge on there. And you could hear that by stacking a couple of those pedals, but cutting a lot of bass at the front end, but still maintaining that impedance interaction you're getting with the start of the fuzz. That is very, very cool. I might actually play you all out with some nice volume swell. So I'll have the Boomster on, but using a fractal expression pedal hooked up to it. So it's going to work like a volume pedal before the low input on the amp. I'll throw a bunch of the fuzzes on there and we'll just have a massive amount of fun with the outro. I'll leave all that grease on from the Saint Rock. I do want to know, what were your favorite tones in this video? What did you think about these pedals individually and how I stacked them? And I want to say a massive, massive thank you to Jam Pedals for sending these out and sponsoring this fuzz party that we had on today's video. Let me know if you'd like to see more in-depth explorations of tones in the future. If you want to learn about any of these pedals, I'll put a link in the video description. Now go and grab your guitars and make a whole bunch of loud noises. I will see you all on the next one.